Who are the rookie wide receivers and tight ends that should be on your fantasy football radar for 2023? We break it down right here and right now as we close another show and close another week of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com.
Hi, and I'm Michelle Madgziuk. I'm a researcher for NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
Yeah, and we're excited to talk today about rookie wide receivers and tight ends for fantasy football that you might be considering for your 2023 drafts or maybe down the line for the waiver wire. So we'll examine that. We looked at quarterbacks and running backs yesterday. So if you missed that, check it out. Today we're going to focus on the pass catchers here that could have an impact that maybe flying a bit under the radar here for this season. Before we do that, I have to tell you this episode Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicles. So parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit, ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. All right, first, Michelle, when we look at the wide receivers, I'm going to look at the guys that are so-called draftable according to the half-point PPR rankings on Fantasy Pros. This is where they are right now. We have Jordan Addison of the Vikings at 37. We have Jaxon Smith-Njigba of the Seahawks at 39. Quentin Johnston of the Chargers at 43. And Zay Flowers of the Ravens at 49. These are all first-round reality picks. Now, looking at this group of four, I know there's some promise here. Obviously, there's a look at them maybe in that wide receiver 4-5 range. Who stands out in this group and who might you be targeting here?
Yeah, so it was unfortunate, right? Most of these first round wide receivers went to a crowded team where they're going to really have to fight for targets. So my favorite wide receiver prior to the draft was coming out as a rookie was Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I think he's the most talented out of this group. And there have been reports. So ESPN's Dan Graziano says that JSN has been the star of camp so far. And he said, I wouldn't just assume he's going to be the Seahawks number 3 receiver or that he's going to be brought along slowly or anything like that, which sounds great, right? My biggest hurdle to get over is where are these targets going to come from? Like, are they going to come away from DK Metcalf? Is Tyler Lockett going to have fewer targets than last year? He only had 117. It's not like he was anything crazy. And they didn't really lose all that much. Like the most they lost is Marquise Goodwin at 42 targets. So it's hard for me to figure out where he fits in. I do think he's extremely talented. I think he's just as talented as Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, who he played with at Ohio State, and he did lead the team in receiving yards that season, playing with all of them in 2021. I think he could put up a rookie season like them. It's just I have a hard time seeing where the targets come in play with two really talented wide receivers playing with him.
Yeah, I agree with you. Of this class, he's the most talented player. He just didn't land in a great spot. Now, the one thing we have to navigate through is the Seahawks look like they're going to feature less 12 personnel and 2 tight end sets, and Noah Fant is hurt, right? So they could be pivoting full-time here to 11 personnel to the most part here, which a lot of teams run, right, most of the time. So that could mean 3 receivers on the field at the same time more often than not, especially in relation to the Seahawks in the past. Now, this is also a run at heart team, right? They want to run the ball. Pete Carroll's going to push Shane Waldron in that direction. If he gets a little too pass happy, you say, look, we have Kenneth Walker. We invested in Zach Charbonnet. We need to run the ball a little bit more and try to win games that way. So it's always going to be a push and pull and a battle. That's why Russell Wilson kind of got out of the situation. But when you look at Smith-Njigba, I think the bottom line is, unfortunately, I think DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett, one of them is going to have an injury here to guarantee those targets. Yeah. Now, Lockett is getting older. Metcalf has been banged up, so it's not out of the question. But I feel like, Michelle, it's very parallel to the Chargers situation, right? You liked Mike
Mhm.
Williams when we were breaking down players to target late. You have Keenan Allen, of course, and then don't forget about the guys last year, Josh Palmer. You have Jalen Guyton trying to come back there. So same thing for Quentin Johnston. I love the player, but how is he going to get on the field and make plays? Are their targets stick around? Then you consider Gerald Everett and Austin Eckler there. So are these
Yeah.
guys in the same boat? And I really like Johnson's upside, but do you agree it has to be an injury there as well, unfortunately, for him to make some noise?
Yeah, so Quentin Johnston, I think, is great for the Chargers in terms of their offense and in terms for Justin Herbert to succeed even greater this year. He is a big piece as to why I love Herbert, because I think his speed and his size is really going to help open up the offense even more. And then Keenan Allen and Mike Williams have had trouble staying healthy in the past. So if one of them goes down, it's not just like, oh, now Josh Palmer is our wide receiver one. But if everyone stays healthy, it's going to be really hard to ever count on Johnston to be consistent whatsoever, because Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are going to get theirs. And then unlike a JSN situation, they also have a running back that's going to steal close to 100 targets with Austin
Yeah.
Eckler. Like, you don't have that with the Seahawks. So I think at best, Johnston is the fourth target in the offense. Now the Chargers do throw way more than the Seahawks, and Johnston can make those really big splash plays, and he will. Like, he's going to have touchdowns of 40 plus yards. It's going to happen, but I don't think he's going to get consistent targets each game, and it's going to be really hard to figure out when to play him. I like him more in a best ball tournament. So when he
Yeah.
does break out, you get those points, but you don't have to decide when to play him.
Yeah, and going back to Jordan Addison now, he's ranked ahead of both of these guys right now, which I'm not saying it's a total head scratcher, but I do question that a little bit. I think the talent is maybe not as high on Jordan Addison. He's a fine player, and I think they drafted him directly to replace Adam Thielen to be a key target in the slot, because they do have KJ Osborne still on the outside. But my concern here, not just the speeding ticket or whatever he got. He's not that fast on the field, by the way. So maybe that's why he was trying to make up for something in his car. But he's more like that possession type, gets open, runs routes. And we've seen this before, like a lot of USC receivers going back to Robert Woods and what Amon Ross St. Brown can do. We've seen this a lot from this type of receiver, from this system, including Michael Pittman Jr. But it hasn't been necessarily speed merchants, right, that you get from the COC. It's more technically sound type receivers. So, look, I do like him, but the situation's not great because Hawkinson is a big part of the offense behind Justin Jefferson. Osborne has had a really good camp, according to reports. I think he's a bit of an underrated receiver. So, I'm not sure that he's going to get the key targets, even though it might seem like his path has more clarity than JSN or Johnston. I just don't see it here with Jordan Addison. I think this is way too high for him.
So I do think with Addison, he does have the best chance out of these first round, or of the guys that we talked about so far with Johnson and JSN, to get over 100 targets, where you see that as being a realistic kind of projection for him this year. But I do think it comes down to who is the second target in this offense. Will it be Jordan Addison or will it be TJ Hawkinson? I don't know if there's room for both of them to kind of hit at their cost, especially, I mean, Hawkinson's going in the third, fourth round right now. If you're taking him, you're really hoping that Addison doesn't get a ton of targets this year. He was amazing at Pitt, right? In 2021, Jordan Addison putting up over nearly 1,600 receiving yards, 17 receiving touchdowns with my boy, Kenny Pickett, I say unenthusiastically. But he didn't perform as well at USC last year. It was a solid enough season. I do think he's really talented. He is on the smaller side, though, only 173 pounds. The thing is, he shouldn't have that much defensive focus on him
Yeah.
since he's playing across from Justin Jefferson. I can see a world where he well outperforms his current ADP. It's just I'm rooting for TJ Hawkinson to have a great year. So I don't think both can happen.
Yeah, I think also Hawkinson is a better replacement for Adam Thielen, I think, overall, because they can use him in the red zone. Keep in mind, a lot of Adam Thielen's points came from touchdowns. He was fading the last couple of years. So that's the biggest thing, is that I think Hawkinson is a better threat to score in key situations for Kirk Cousins than Addison would be. Now, the one guy that is in this draftable tier, we'll call it, is Zay Flowers. And I'm not sure I can invest in any Ravens wide receiver at this point. I don't know what you're going to get from Rashad Bateman coming back from his Liz Frank type foot injury. You got Odell Beckham Jr. maybe commanding the ball a little bit. You got Nelson Aguilar. Then don't forget about Isaiah Likely behind Mark Andrews. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to get from this Ravens passing game. We've heard, they're going to open it up here with Todd Monken and throw the ball around the park. But I need to see it to believe it, and I don't know exactly. The Ravens kind of passing game scares me, other than Mark Andrews with Lamar Jackson.
So if I am going to take a shot on any of these four guys that we talked about so far, it will be on Zay Flowers. It's because he has a much later ADP than them. He's going 119th overall. You can get him in the 10th round, where Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Jordan Addison are going a couple rounds prior to that. And you have to take Addison and JSN over guys like Brandon Cooks and Jahan Dotson and Marquise Brown. Like, guys that should be pretty good for their team this year. And then you get down to Zay Flowers, though, and you're taking him over guys like Sky Moore, Jameson Williams, Adam Thielen. That's where I want to take the shot. It's not, I didn't even think I didn't love Zay Flowers as a prospect. It's not like I thought he was good, but I had the other three guys we talked about above him. But he actually has a chance to be his team's wide receiver one. Now, the top target is still going to probably be Mark Andrews, but he does have that capability to be the second target on the team. He's fast. He can get it done after the catch. And we saw Marquise Brown be a viable fantasy asset with Lamar Jackson. And if they actually pass more this year with their new offensive coordinator, maybe it'll all work out. So it's not that I think Zay Flowers is going to be great, but I'm willing to take the chance on a guy who could well outperform his ADP if he ends up being the wide receiver one for his team.
Yeah, and Flowers, to keep in mind, Odell Beckham Jr. is old. He's had some knee injuries. Rashad Bateman's coming off a pretty major injury here that's hard to ignore. And Nelson Aguilar is Nelson Aguilar. You just can't expect him to do too much here. So there's some things to keep in mind. But unfortunately, I think there's going to need to be some attrition in some of these situations to really help our guys here. But it's worth, right, their values right now. So we'll dig a little bit deeper with rookie wide receivers, so very deep here in our second segment. We'll also look at the rookie tight ends we're having on our radar. Very good class here in the real draft. So we'll explore that in our final two segments here on Locked On Fantasy Football. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen, your destination to become the smartest football player in your league in fantasy. We are part of Locked On Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. I'm also proud to tell you that this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. August is here, and you know what that means. It's the official start of fantasy football drafting month. Get championship ready for your home league by trying out Best Ball at Underdog Fantasy. All you do is one live snake draft, no waivers, no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every week. Try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania Tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back, and even bigger, with $15 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner drafted their team in July. So it's August right now, so don't wait around. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code LOCKEDON, all caps. That's Locked On in all caps, to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Locked On. Again, easiest way to get in on it, and maybe we'll put up our teams here, Michelle and I, so we'll look at that here for you as well. So a lot of fun. It's time to get in on fantasy football, and Underdog Fantasy Best Ball Mania is going on right now, so check it out. All right, Michelle, it's time to continue the show, and I'm going to run down some receivers here that are outside the radar as rookies that may not be draftable, but they might be come the end of preseason and training camp. So let's look at them. I'll run down their current rankings, half point PPR according to Fantasy Pros right now. Jonathan Mingo of the Panthers, 78. Rashee Rice at 84. Jayden Reed of the Packers at 86. Josh Downs of the Colts, 87. Jalen Hyde of the Giants, 88. Marvin Mims, Broncos, 94. Cedric Tillman, we saw him in action in the Hall of Fame game, 107 on the board. Kayshon Boutte of the Patriots, 108. Tank Dell of the Texans, 109. Puka Nacua at 112. And I'm mentioning him only because it's kind of cool. Michael Wilson, 117. Let's go, Sophia Smith, his girlfriend. They're in the Women's World Cup, so let's do it. So let's beat Sweden. So I had to mention him just for that reason. I don't think I'm looking at him in fantasy, but of the other guys that I mentioned, who are you looking at that may have some value? I think I know where you're going, but let's see, Michelle.
Well, what's interesting about these group of guys, right? The ones that went in the second round or early third round is they actually, most of them landed in a really good spot where they have the opportunity to fight to be the top target on their team, or at the very least, the second target. So it's kind of opposite of these first round guys that went. So there's a lot of guys in really good situations. I'm going to go first, I think, Rashee Rice, right? We're trying to find who is going to be Patrick Mahomes wide receiver one. Like, who is it going to be? I know last year it didn't really matter all that much. It was Travis Kelce, and really Travis Kelce only. There was a couple good games with the wide receivers here or there, but how long can that really last? Like, Patrick Mahomes is too good not to have a great fantasy wide receiver as well. So the Chiefs drafted him 55th overall. He has good size, over 6 feet tall, 204 pounds. He had 2,700 receiving yards over the last 3 seasons at SMU. That was the 5th most in FBS over that span. He led the FBS in receiving yards per game last season. He had a really good contested catch rate. He was really good after the catch. He's interesting to me. Now, I know the Chiefs are talking up like Justin Ross this offseason. Maybe he's the guy. But when you're talking up Justin Ross so hard, you really know there's an opportunity there for a guy to earn the wide receiver one spot.
Yeah, it's unfortunate none of those guys we talked about in the first segment ended up with Patrick Mahomes in a weak receiving core. I just wish one of those guys was there, especially Quentin Johnson. But when I look at Rashee Rice, yeah, he's a solid overall receiver. He's not spectacular in any one way, but Juju Smith-Schuster wasn't all that spectacular in one way, and he produced, right? He came through enough in fantasy where he was a good value and definitely finished in scoring way higher than 84th at wide receiver, right? So I think this is maybe a ranking that's headed up slowly as we get more reports out of camp, as we see him play in the preseason. So this might be his lowest value right now, but it's a receiver tied to Patrick Mahomes where he's battling Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, the perpetually injured Kadarius Toney with a knee or something else. Sky Moore, we'll see if he can carve out a role, but I think Rice would be more the complete receiver, right? MBS is a big play threat. Sky Moore might be the slot guy, but Rashee Rice could be on the field for a lot of key high leverage spots here for the Chiefs. So that's what we're hoping to get his number up. Now, right behind him, and I've heard a lot of buzz about Jayden Reed coming out of Packers camp. Now, this is a golden opportunity, right? The Packers are essentially a very young receiving corps. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Samori Toure are your veterans. You know there's a lot of youth going on this team. So you look at Jayden Reed, and he's a talented receiver. I mean, a Big Ten guy. I saw him play a lot at Michigan State. He's very technically sound, can line up anywhere on the field, and that's very important for the Packers because they want to move around Doubs and Watson and really try to find ways to scheme guys open with Matt LaFleur. So when I look at Reed, this guy has a big opportunity as well, right? I mean, we don't know how it's going to line up. It's Watson and Doubs and maybe Toure, and then you got Luke Musgrave, a rookie tight end as well. So golden opportunity. It's a whole receiving core in flux here for the past 2 seasons. So when you look at that, Reed has a good opportunity. So these are 2 guys I'm circling there, Rice and Reed. Now, going a little bit deeper, is there anyone else on the list that I mentioned, or maybe not on the guys that I talked about, Michelle, that you're interested in?
So my favorite guy to take with one of my last picks is Tank Dell. He's now with Houston Texans. All right. He has a real shot to be the wide receiver one with them too. So you get the theme here. I like guys who have shot to actually get targets. He's a 69th overall pick. So he was a 3rd rounder and he is very small. He's only 5'8" and a half, 165 pounds. What I do want to say, he actually has a higher BMI than Jordan Addison. And we're not worried about Jordan Addison. Like, I'm not hearing anybody being like Jordan Addison's too small, right? He led the FBS last year in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns. He's the only FBS player that had 1,300 plus receiving yards in both 2021 and 2022. And we have pretty much every single player who got targets for Houston gone last year. Brandon Cooks is gone. Chris Moore is gone. Jordan Aiken's gone. Rex Burkhead gone. Philip Dorsett gone. The only guy in the top 6 in targets for the Texans last year that's still there is Nico Collins. He had 66 targets and 10 games played. It's wide open. It's wide open. I know there's been a lot of reports saying John Mechie looks really good, and I'm very excited for him. But, I mean, CJ Stroud is going to have to find someone to pass to. Tank Dell is kind of his guy that he wanted in this draft. I think he can be a PPR. Like, I would only want him in PPR leagues, full PPR, but I think he can be a PPR machine.
Yeah, the one takeaway here is that Michelle and I like rookies named Tank, because I like Tank Bigsby out of the backfield. Tank Dell, it's just a great name. Like, I think it's an old school football nickname, but I like it that it's ironic, right? His name is Nathaniel Dell. No one's going to draft a guy named Nathaniel Dell, but you put the name Tank on it, all of a sudden he's like this muscle hamster part 2 or something when you consider his name. So, yeah, I like the opportunity in the wide open. Like, if I was going to go with one other person, I would go with Marvin Mims, and I'll mention him because Tim Patrick, surprise, he's hurt again. Cortland Sutton is fading fast. It looks like Jerry Jeudy is kind of back in the good graces of the new Broncos offense here. So they need number 2. KJ Hamler is also released. So look, Marvin Mims, we talked about him a little bit. There is an opportunity there for sure. And I like Marvin Mims because he's a big play guy, and Sutton hasn't lived up to that. I think Jeudy is more the technical guy that you're going to line up all over the field, a little bit like Amari Cooper-esque at his best out of Alabama. So when you look at that, but I do like the situation there that could really help Marvin Mims, and they're high on him. I liked him in Oklahoma. I like the fact that he could make big plays, whether it was stretching the field or after the catch. I like his sudden burst, quickness, speed, all that good stuff. So we'll watch out for Mims. We'll watch out for Dell. I think those guys are in good situations. And sometimes for rookies, situation might be actually more important than talent at the get-go for production here. So we'll talk about the situations for the tight ends in our final segment here on Locked On Fantasy Football to close the week as well. Again, thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Everydayers, thanks for sticking with us, being here 5 days a week as we break it down for you fantasy football-wise. We will be taking a weekend off, and we'll come back at you Monday. We'll start looking at the second-year players. So we'll look at quarterbacks and running backs on Monday, and then follow that up with the wide receivers and tight ends again on Tuesday, because youth serves well in fantasy football, and we want to give you the best in-depth analysis of all those players. So we'll bring it to you as we get closer to the first preseason action, and we'll help you dominate your fantasy football drafts by the end of August. All right, Michelle, it's time to close the show and our week of shows here, and it's been a fun first week with you as co-host, so I appreciate that. And going forward, she's going to be here all the time. I'm going to be here all the time, hopefully, and we'll bring it to you to help you just ace your drafts here. Now, Michelle, we're going to talk about the tight ends, and usually we write off rookie tight ends, right? It usually takes year 2 before somebody gets on our radar to say, okay, we're going to draft them, or they're going to have fantasy football impact at some point this season. But there's some names here and this quality of class that you could see some impact. So let's go down where these guys are ranked. There's no one in the tight end 1 realm right now, but you look at Dalton Kincaid. He went to the Bills with Dawson Knox at number 18. Sam LaPorta trying to fill in TJ Hawkinson coming out of Iowa with the Lions at 22. Michael Mayer, as we mentioned once, competing with Austin Hooper and O.J. Howard with the Raiders at 29 out of Notre Dame. We have Luke Musgrave, who's getting some rave reviews for Packers camp at 37, and Luke Schoonmaker. So we have a couple of Lukes here at 41 of the Cowboys behind Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot. So, Michelle, take it away. What do you like and not like of this rookie tight end ranking?
So I want to be clear. I almost have like no desire to take a rookie tight end for a reason, because you mentioned it, but it's like history tells us that only 1 or 2 of these guys are going to matter for fantasy ever in their careers, let alone their rookie season. Like, you can go through every tight end draft class, and you're like, there's many draft classes where not a single tight end ended up mattering for fantasy ever. And sometimes there's one guy very rare it's two guys in one class. So it's hard to pick a good tight end, especially rookie tight end. But this is a special class, I feel like, of tight ends. And fantasy desperately needs a good tight end class. So I'm hoping that this year is different. There's only been 5 rookie tight ends that have scored 10 plus fantasy points per game in the rookie season ever. So that's just, let's just remind us of that first. But I am about to talk up a guy and ignore everything I just said. Sam LaPorta for the Lions. I really, really love him. I think he reminds me, I know maybe it's just the jersey and the helmet, but he reminds me of a George Kittle, of what he can do after the catch. He's just truly impressive with the ball in his hands. And he's on a team that passes a lot, that has a good offense coordinator, and only has Amon-Ra St. Brown to be to get targets as a wide receiver. And there's no tight end competition. It seems like he's the clear-cut starter in this offense.
Yeah, I'm a Northwestern guy, but for some reason I'm obsessed with Iowa tight ends. So that includes George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson. I can go back to winning a championship with Dallas Clark. So I like Iowa tight ends. They just are machines here. Noah Fant, also a good guy. I wish he would have a better situation. But when you look at LaPorta, same type of situation here, right? I mean, you're right. The targets are limited. Jamison Williams is suspended. They don't have a lot of reliable guys, as you mentioned. And this is the middle of the field offense, right? You go back to Jared Goff's days with Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee with the Rams. He loves throwing in the middle of the field. And Amon-Ra St. Brown does that out of the slot. The tight end does it. LaPorta is in that spot. So very athletic guy. You're right. There's a direct path to key targets for Sam LaPorta that other tight ends and other wide receivers that we've talked about may not have here this season. So I like that. I mean, Dalton Kincaid I like, but not a very good situation, right? When you include Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir and, of course, Pro Bowler Dawson Knox at tight end. So that is a very hard crowd to stand above, even in a high-volume passing game with Josh Allen. Now, you like LaPorta. The other tight end factory, so to speak, is Notre Dame. And I do like Michael Mayer quite a bit. I thought he was the best tight end in the draft for a lot of the process. I know he's not special, right? I think Kincaid is a more dazzling athlete. LaPorta might be a little bit better all around as a tight end, in line and all that. But Michael Mayer just made plays. If you watch the Fighting Irish, he was a guy that got open. They threw him in the red zone. He was fired up. He's doing what you need to do. And we talked about this a little bit before when he was a player for me to target, that he's got Jimmy Garoppolo, likes throwing the tight end. He's got Josh McDaniels, who likes to feature the tight end. No competition there. Really, it just comes down to how big of a factor Hunter Renfrow is going to be again in this new offense. Is it going to be a fade out, or is it just going to be now Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers and then Renfrow? So if he can wrangle up that third role, Michael Mayer, and he's been going up the rankings a little bit. He was way buried in the 30s, so something to keep in mind. He's going up, then there's something to look at there. But I wouldn't close the door on these rookie tight ends just as waiver wire ads, even if you're struggling at the position. I wouldn't necessarily bang the table and go draft them, but I'd say maybe LaPorta is the exception. But what do you think? I'll just close it with this guy. Luke Musgrave, he's been getting some raves here. Now, Luke Schoonmaker, pretty much a blocker for the Cowboys, so we're not going to talk about him. But Luke Musgrave legit looks like he could be a key part of this offense with Jordan Love in Green Bay.
He really does. And Josiah DeGuara was injured with a calf injury yesterday. Yeah. So that's going to give both rookies more time. That's the issue. They also took Tucker Kraft in the 3rd round, but it does seem like Musgrave has the lead right now to get more of the snaps. And we've been talking about this all episode long. It could be Jayden Reed, right? That's the number 1 target in the offense. It could be Christian Watson. It could be Romeo Dobbs. It also could be Luke Musgrave. Like, we don't know yet who the number 1 target is with the Packers. So even if he's not the top guy, he should get a good amount of targets in his rookie year. It just comes down to, will he score touchdowns? Are the Packers offense moving the ball? And how many scoring opportunities does he actually have? And hopefully Tucker Kraft doesn't steal too many snaps from him. But he's definitely a guy I'm keeping an eye on. I'm not probably going to consider drafting him, but he's someone that we could pick up off waivers in the middle of the season.
All right, Michelle, I think we covered it. We went pretty deep, I would say, with wide receivers and tight ends in the rookie class on today's show. So I'm excited to talk about second-year players next week. So we'll get into that conversation. And thanks again for making us your first listen every day. Welcome to Locked On Fantasy Football, your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league. We're part of Locked On Network, your team every day. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Madgziuk. Bye, y'all.